Hey guys, it's Bjors. I'm just going to tell you very quickly about thumbnailing and my process behind it in a work environment. So, in a work environment, you generally get a brief, and the brief can be descriptive and sometimes it's not descriptive at all. It's just, here's a character, paint something. And in this case, it was the latter. So you can see me pull up the model that they had that I wanted me to paint, and normally thumbnails are not going to be as detailed as what I am doing on screen right now. Normally a thumbnail is a lot of quick strokes and it's value based, there are no lines, and the reason for that is because the thumbnail is mainly for you. You know, if you have an idea, you want to get it out, and usually nobody else can read that. So when you're working for a client, you need to do a second step, sort of, where you do the really rough thumbnails for yourself, maybe in your sketchbook or something, and then you need to do like almost like a rough sketch for your client, because otherwise they have no idea what they're looking at. They're going to be like, what is this blob and what is this other angular blob, you know? So what I'm doing here is essentially that I'm doing a rough sketch, and I think this one took me about an hour in total to do, and I did 3 of them. In most cases, you have to do 3 to 4 thumbnails per assignment. And you can see me here. I'm using pretty much the same technique as I do for a regular finished illustration. It's just I'm doing it faster, rougher. I'm not too worried about anatomy or placement at the moment, because once I've done the lines, once I fill in the values, I can just move it around as much as I want. So first of all, I just get the idea down. And you can see I'm moving things around, I'm rescaling them, and stuff like that. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. Fuck, I'm out of coffee. So specifically for Smite, they really like forced perspectives, but not as extreme as say comic books. You know, they want some sort of action, but not, I don't know, not comic booky or fisheye, stuff like that. So I usually have to dial it back quite a bit from what I personally want to do. Like if I did this, I would probably want his hand to reach all the way into the screen, and you'd kind of have to step back from the screen because it felt like it was touching you. That sounded inappropriate. uh, but yeah. And you can see too that I'm not even concerned about accuracy in the design. Um, his face is all wrong. You know, that's not what this guy looks like. But at this point, it's just too early to care. It's too early to fix all those issues. Because all we need is something that explains what I'm about to do to the client. You know, this is not for me. This I'm doing purely to give the client an idea of, okay, this is my idea. This is what I'm gonna do with your character. Do you like it? Do you have changes? You know, etc. So I would do 3 of these, send it out, and they would get back to me with feedback or be like, move this, change this, or just say it's okay. And in this case, they love the idea, so no revisions, yay! Another thing that's very specific to Smite cards is that you want to have the character fairly zoomed in, because these are going to be viewed not very big on your monitor. I mean, they're loading screen images in the game, and when you buy the skin, so they're not going to take up your whole screen. So you can't really zoom them all the way out, to the point where you can see the whole character and there's this vast environment around them. So it has to be very right there, and that leaves you very little space for action, especially in this portrait format as opposed to landscape format. And you can see here I'm not even caring about perspective or anything. I'm just using the lasso tool the polygonal lasso tool to get these shapes in, and that's it. Because all of these things are stuff that I can worry about later. You know, all I want right now is I want the graphic design of my image. So the big shapes, the small shapes, the values of those shapes is in this image. And you also kind of want to indicate what kind of lighting you're going to go for. So there's a kind of go-to lighting with these cards or these paintings for Smite, which is you want it to be mostly front lit, maybe a little bit to the side, and then a very strong rim light. That's just a stylistic choice they have. So that's why you see so many images with pretty much the same lighting. And you know, sometimes it works, sometimes I think it's kind of silly, but that's another thing about working in the industry. You know, you gotta really think about what is the design or what is the style of what I'm working on. And in this case, you know, it's a very strict kind of lighting scheme. But it makes sense as well because it's iconic. You know, these are supposed to be gods, and you want every single one of them to look powerful and like otherworldly, I suppose. Maybe not otherworldly, because then you would probably do a bottom lighting. But my point is that you need it to be dramatic, and it's this an easier way to make it dramatic, like have a spotlight on him, some rim light on him, and then everything else would just be like ambient light or bounce light from the surrounding. I also think this lighting scheme is just, I don't know, it's better suited for something like this where, you know, you want the focus to be his face, you want everything to be lit up perfectly. It's just easier, I guess. It shows off what you want to show off. You know, if you put a spotlight right in his face, and the face is what you want to look at, then that's what you should do. Now, if I made this character backlit and most of his silhouette was this really dark, can barely see what's going on, then that wouldn't be very representational of the character. Because in the end, this is not just about making a cool image, it's about also showing off the character. And while it would be cool to have one of those dramatic scenes, you know, he's backlit or something, he's about to crush someone and you can't even see him, you can just see like two eyes glowing in the dark. That could be really cool, but it doesn't show off the design or anything. It shows off his character but not his design, is what I'm trying to get at. So you want to show off both. And before we end this video, you know, a lot of people say you should only spend a few minutes on thumbnails. Well, yes and no. When you make a thumbnail for yourself in your sketchbook, sure, they could take maybe 5 minutes because you're just doing them tiny in your sketchbook and nobody else has to see them. But when you're doing them for other people to read and understand, then I think it's definitely worth it to spend more time on them, and actually for yourself as well. I think it's more important to spend time on these things because it's such an important part of the image. The thumbnail and the sketch that you make before you start painting basically outlines everything you're about to do in this painting. This is where you work out your composition, your lighting, sometimes your color, the atmosphere. All the big elements and the small elements are figured out in this first step, so that when you go in and paint, you don't suddenly go, oh crap, I didn't think about the background, what am I going to do? Or, oh crap, I didn't think about the lighting on this rock, and now it steals all the attention, you know, whatever. That was a bad example, but whatever. You want to work all of this out in the beginning of an image so that you don't get stuck later on. Because this is the image. This thumbnail is the image, and you're going to see that later at the end of this tutorial that, you know, it looks pretty much the same. I fixed all the anatomy, I fixed the perspective and all that, but it's essentially the same image, right?